Two men offered him enough money to save his family if he betrayed a dying woman's trust. A poor delivery driver spent his last few dollars buying lunch for an old woman everyone else laughed at. 24 hours later, black SUVs rolled into his neighborhood. A billionaire was asking for his name, and a secret hidden behind a rusty key threatened to expose a conspiracy worth millions. Why would one of the richest families in America be searching for a man who could barely pay for his mother's medicine? And what was so important about the old woman everyone had dismissed as a nobody? The bell above the diner door gave a tired little jingle as Marcus Reed stepped inside from the cold Detroit afternoon. Warm air wrapped around him immediately. The smell of coffee, grilled onions, and fresh soup drifted through the room. Yellow lights glowed above worn wooden booths. Forks clinked against plates. A television mounted in the corner murmured through a daytime news segment nobody seemed to be watching. For a moment, Marcus simply stood there. His shoulders ached. His feet hurt. He had been delivering food since sunrise. And after a full day of work, he still didn't have enough money. Not enough for rent. Not enough for groceries. Not enough for the medication his mother needed. He slipped his hand into his jacket pocket and felt the few wrinkled bills folded there. $23. That was everything he had left. His mother needed medicine before tomorrow. He had promised her. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Just one more delivery tonight, he thought. Maybe then things would be okay. Maybe. A waitress waved from behind the counter.
Good morning to you.
Coffee, Marcus? He smiled politely. Not today. The woman nodded with understanding. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Marcus. Not because he was important. Not because he was rich. But because he was kind. The kind of man who helped elderly neighbors carry groceries. The kind of man who shoveled snow from sidewalks that weren't his. The kind of man who never seemed to stop giving, even when life gave him very little in return. He moved toward the pickup counter where he was supposed to collect an order. Then a sharp voice cut through the room. "Ma'am, you need to leave." Marcus glanced over. Near the entrance stood an elderly white woman. She looked small beneath the fluorescent lights. Her gray coat was faded and thin. The sleeves were worn. The shoes on her feet looked decades old. One lace was missing. She held an old handbag tightly against her chest. Not casually, desperately, as if letting go of it would mean losing everything. The waitress speaking to her folded her arms. "We already told you. Customers only." A few people nearby laughed. One man shook his head. "Probably looking for free food." Another woman rolled her eyes. "They come in here every winter." The old woman's face reddened. She lowered her eyes. "I only wanted something warm to eat." Her voice was soft, almost trembling. The waitress sighed. "You need money for that." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Nobody volunteered. Nobody looked at her. Most people simply returned to their meals. Marcus watched. Something twisted inside his chest. The scene felt painfully familiar. Not because he'd been hungry, though he had. Not because he'd been poor, though he was. It reminded him of his father, years ago. Before his father passed away. Before life became one long struggle. People had looked at his father the same way, like he didn't matter. Like poverty made a person invisible. Marcus swallowed hard. The old woman turned toward the door. Her shoulders slumped. The cold waited outside. Then Marcus heard himself speak. "Excuse me." Heads turned. The old woman looked up. Marcus stepped forward. "What would you like to eat, ma'am?" The woman blinked. "What?" "I asked what you'd like." The waitress stared. Marcus. But he was already reaching into his pocket. His fingers closed around the money he'd been saving. His mother's medicine. His last $23. Every bit of it. He looked at the old woman and smiled. A meal shouldn't be something people have to beg for. The woman stared at him. Her eyes suddenly glistened. "No," she whispered. "You don't have to do that." "I know, but I'd like to." The diner had gone quiet. Even the people who had laughed before were watching now. Marcus ignored them. He pulled out a chair. The old woman sat slowly, like she couldn't quite believe it. The waitress eventually took the order. Soup, a sandwich, coffee. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. But the old woman's hands shook when the food arrived. Marcus sat across from her. He wasn't eating. He couldn't afford to. Instead, he watched her take the first spoonful of soup. The expression on her face changed immediately. Relief, warmth, comfort. The kind that goes deeper than hunger. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Outside, snow drifted lazily through the gray afternoon. Inside, the diner hummed quietly. Finally, the woman looked at him. "Why did you help me?" Marcus shrugged. "My mom taught me something." "What?" "If somebody's hurting and you can help, then help." The old woman smiled sadly. "Not many people believe that anymore." Marcus chuckled softly. "Maybe." The woman studied him. Really studied him. As if trying to memorize his face, his tired eyes, his worn jacket, his calloused hands. Then she asked quietly, "Do you have family?" Marcus nodded. "My mother and my son." "You have a son? 9 years old." The woman's expression softened. "You must love him very much." "I do." She looked down at her coffee. "He is lucky." Marcus wasn't sure what to say. Nobody had ever called his son lucky. Not living where they lived, not with the bills they faced, not with the future he worried about every night. But hearing it somehow felt nice. The woman smiled faintly. "You remind me of someone." "Who?" "My husband." Marcus laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should." The woman laughed too. A small laugh. Gentle. Real. For a few moments, she didn't look afraid anymore. She looked like somebody's grandmother. Somebody who belonged somewhere. Somebody who should have been loved. Then the diner door opened. Cold wind swept inside. 3 men entered. Business suits. Expensive watches. Polished shoes. The old woman's smile disappeared instantly. Marcus noticed. Every bit of warmth vanished from her face. Her fingers tightened around the handbag. Her breathing changed. Fear. Pure fear. The men hadn't even looked at her yet. But she was terrified. Marcus frowned. "You okay?" The woman forced a smile. "Yes." But it was clearly a lie. The men sat several booths away, talking quietly. The old woman lowered her head. Marcus could feel the tension radiating from her. Who were they? Why was she scared? Before he could ask, the woman suddenly stood. "I should go. You barely finished." "I know." She reached into her handbag. Marcus immediately raised a hand. "No. You don't owe me anything." The woman stared at him. Then something unexpected happened. Tears filled her eyes. Not dramatic tears. Not loud tears. Just quiet ones. The kind that appear when someone has carried pain for a very long time. "You are a good man, Marcus Reed." Marcus froze. He never told her his last name. The woman seemed to realize her mistake. For a second her eyes widened. Then she quickly looked away. Marcus felt a chill. How do you know my name? The old woman hesitated. A long moment passed. Then she leaned closer. Her voice became barely more than a whisper. If anyone asks about me. Marcus frowned. Don't believe them. What? She slipped something into his jacket pocket. Fast. So fast he barely noticed. Then she stepped back. Fear returned to her eyes. If someone comes looking. Her voice trembled. Please don't trust them. Marcus stood. Wait, but the woman was already moving toward the door. The bell jingled. Cold air rushed inside. Snow swirled beyond the glass. And then she was gone. Marcus hurried outside. The street stretched in both directions. Cars passed. Pedestrians moved along the sidewalks. But somehow, she had vanished, as if she had never been there. Marcus stood in the falling snow, confused, uneasy. Something felt wrong, very wrong. Slowly he reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers touched cold metal. He pulled it out. A small brass key, old, worn, heavy. Marcus stared at it. Snowflakes landed on the metal surface. Behind him, the diner door opened. The waitress called out. Marcus, your pickup order is ready. But Marcus barely heard her. His eyes remained fixed on the key. And one question echoed through his mind. Why would a frightened old woman trust a complete stranger with something she seemed willing to die protecting? Snow drifted across the streetlights as Marcus stood outside the diner, staring at the brass key resting in his palm. The metal was cold, older than anything he owned, worn smooth around the edges from years of use. There were no markings, no numbers, no names, just a small key that somehow felt heavier than it should. A horn blared somewhere down the street. Marcus blinked. Reality returned. His delivery order, his bills, his mother, his son. Whatever strange thing had just happened would have to wait. He slipped the key into his pocket and climbed onto his aging scooter. The engine sputtered twice before finally starting. Come on, girl, he muttered. The scooter growled weakly. Detroit's winter wind cut through his jacket as he drove across town. Streetlights reflected on patches of dirty snow. Neon signs buzzed above liquor stores and pawn shops. The city looked tired, the same way Marcus felt. An hour later, he finally returned to the neighborhood he called home. Rows of aging brick apartment buildings stretched beneath the cloudy night sky. Paint peeled from railings. Windows rattled when the wind blew. A broken street lamp flickered near the corner grocery store. Marcus parked beside the building and climbed the stairs to the second floor. Before he could unlock the door, it flew open. Dad! A small figure launched himself forward. Marcus barely had time to react before 8-year-old Jordan wrapped both arms around him. A smile immediately spread across Marcus's face. There he is. Jordan grinned. You're late. I know. You promised we'd watch the game. Marcus winced playfully. I know that too. Jordan folded his arms dramatically. You always say that. That's because it's always true. The boy laughed. The sound warmed Marcus more than the heater ever could. Inside the apartment, the smell of chicken soup drifted from the kitchen. His mother sat in a recliner near the window. A blanket covered her legs. The television glowed softly across her tired face. Evening, Mama. She smiled. There he is. Marcus bent down and kissed her forehead. The skin felt warmer than usual. Too warm. His smile faded slightly. You okay? I'm fine. The answer came too quickly. Marcus recognized it immediately. The same answer she always gave when she wasn't fine. The same answer she'd been giving ever since the heart condition got worse. He sat beside her. "Did you take your medication?" A brief silence. That was all the answer he needed. His stomach tightened. "Mama." She looked away. "The pills are almost gone." Marcus closed his eyes. The medicine. The money. The $23. Gone. Spent on lunch for a stranger. Guilt hit him immediately. Not because helping the woman had been wrong, but because his mother needed him too. His mother touched his hand, as if reading his thoughts. "Don't." "What? Don't make that face." Marcus looked at her. "You know what face." A small smile appeared, the face your father used to make when he worried. Marcus laughed quietly. His father had been gone nearly 10 years. Some days it felt like yesterday. Other days it felt like another lifetime. Jordan jumped onto the couch beside them. "Grandma says you helped somebody today." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Mama." "What?" She looked innocent. "You tell me everything." Jordan leaned closer. "Did you save somebody?" Marcus chuckled. "No." "Fight bad guys?" "No." "Stop a robbery?" "No." Jordan groaned. Then what happened? Marcus hesitated. How did he explain it? A frightened old woman, a strange warning, a mysterious key. Even saying it aloud sounded ridiculous. "I bought lunch for someone." Jordan blinked. "That's it?" "That's it." The boy looked disappointed. Marcus laughed. Then Jordan smiled. "My teacher says that's still a hero thing." Marcus looked away. Nobody had called him a hero before, not in real life. Heroes weren't men struggling to pay rent. Heroes weren't delivery drivers with broken scooters. Heroes didn't spend nights wondering how to afford medicine. Still, the words stayed with him. Later that night, after Jordan fell asleep and his mother retired to her room, Marcus finally found himself alone. The apartment grew quiet. Only the hum of the refrigerator remained. Slowly, he pulled the brass key from his pocket. He placed it on the kitchen table. The overhead light reflected off the metal. For several minutes, he simply stared. Something about it bothered him. Not the key itself. The woman. The fear in her eyes. The way she reacted when those businessmen entered the diner. The way she somehow knew his full name. Marcus leaned back. How had she known? He never introduced himself. The waitress had never said it, at least not while the woman was there. A chill ran through him. The key suddenly felt less like an object and more like a question without an answer. He turned it over, examined every detail. Nothing. No clues, no markings, no explanation. Finally, he slipped it into a kitchen drawer. Enough. He had bigger problems. Tomorrow he needed work. Tomorrow he needed medicine. Tomorrow he needed money. The mystery could wait, or so he thought. The next morning began badly. The moment Marcus opened his eyes, his phone vibrated. A notification appeared. Delivery account under review. Temporarily suspended. His heart sank. What? He sat upright. Another notification followed. Customer complaint filed. Access suspended pending investigation. Marcus stared, confused, then angry. He had never received a serious complaint. Not once. His rating was nearly perfect. His hands trembled as he opened the app. Nothing. Locked out. No deliveries. No income. For a long moment, he simply sat on the edge of the bed, staring. The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer. Jordan's school expenses, rent, electricity, medicine, everything depended on those deliveries. Everything. A knock interrupted his thoughts. His mother appeared in the doorway. "Marcus?" He quickly hid the phone. "Yeah?" Her smile faded. "What happened?" Mothers always knew, even when they weren't supposed to. Marcus forced a smile. "Nothing." She sighed. "You're a terrible liar." He laughed weakly, then showed her the phone. The silence that followed felt heavy. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. "I'll figure it out." "You always say that." "Because I always do." But this time he wasn't sure. Not really. An hour later, he headed outside. The sky hung low and gray over Detroit. Snow threatened again. Marcus walked toward where he'd parked his scooter, then stopped. His stomach dropped. The space was empty. For several seconds, he couldn't understand what he was seeing. Then he noticed the bright orange sticker attached to the curb. "Towed unpaid registration," Marcus laughed once. A short, bitter sound. Of course. Why not? The city had finally caught up with him. No scooter, no delivery account, no money. The universe seemed determined to keep score. He stood there for a long time, watching traffic move past. People rushing to jobs. People rushing to places that needed them. Nobody noticed him. Nobody stopped. Nobody cared. And for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt invisible. Not ignored. Invisible. The way poor people often became invisible. The way hard-working people became invisible when they had nothing left to give. A familiar voice interrupted him. "Rough morning?" Marcus turned. It was Mrs. Henderson from next door, 72 years old, retired school teacher, neighborhood gossip champion. He smiled politely. "You could say that." She studied him, then lowered her voice. "This about that old woman?" Marcus froze. "What old woman?" "The one everybody's talking about." His pulse quickened. "What are you talking about?" Mrs. Henderson pointed toward the television visible through the corner convenience store window. A news report was playing. Marcus looked. His heart stopped. A photograph filled the screen. The same woman. The woman from the diner. The woman he'd bought lunch for. The headline below her picture read, "Missing elderly woman last seen in downtown Detroit. Police seeking information." Marcus stared. His mouth went dry. The reporter continued speaking, but he barely heard the words. All he could see was her face. The fear. The warning. The key. And suddenly every strange detail from yesterday felt much more dangerous than mysterious. Mrs. Henderson frowned. "You know her?" Marcus couldn't answer, because one terrifying thought had just entered his mind. If people were searching for her, then sooner or later, someone might start searching for him too. Marcus stood frozen outside the convenience store. The television screen continued flashing images of the elderly woman. The same trembling hands, the same frightened eyes, the same face he had watched eat soup less than 24 hours earlier. A scrolling banner moved across the bottom of the screen. "Missing elderly woman, police request information." The reporter spoke about concerns for her safety, about witnesses, about unanswered questions. Marcus barely heard any of it. His pulse thudded in his ears. The brass key suddenly felt heavier inside his pocket. Much heavier. Mrs. Henderson looked up at him. "You really do know her?" Marcus quickly forced a smile. No. I just thought she looked familiar. The old woman narrowed her eyes. She didn't believe him. Not completely. But thankfully, she didn't push further. You be careful out there, she said. People disappear every day in this city. Marcus nodded. The words followed him all the way home. People disappear every day. That afternoon felt endless. He spent hours calling customer support, waiting on hold, explaining, repeating himself, getting nowhere. Every conversation ended the same way. We're sorry, sir. Your account is under review. Please wait for further investigation. Investigation. The word made him laugh bitterly. Investigation meant bills piling up. Investigation meant his mother missing medication. Investigation meant Jordan asking questions he couldn't answer. By evening, he had accomplished nothing. Nothing except growing more worried. The apartment felt darker than usual. Outside, Detroit disappeared beneath another layer of snow. Inside, the heater rattled weakly. Marcus sat at the kitchen table staring at unpaid bills. Hospital notices, electric statements, school fees, numbers, always numbers. The amount owed always seemed larger than the amount earned. His mother slowly entered the room. She moved carefully, more carefully than she used to. The sight hurt Marcus every time. She sat across from him. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, she looked at the stack of bills, then at her son. You don't have to carry everything alone. Marcus smiled weakly. I know, no. You don't. He looked down. His mother reached across the table, taking his hand. When your father got sick, he thought being strong meant suffering quietly. Her voice softened. But real strength is letting people help. Marcus swallowed. He remembered those years. The hospital visits, the long nights, the fear. I don't know who can help us. His mother smiled sadly. Sometimes help arrives from places we don't expect. The words lingered, because they reminded him of someone. A frightened old woman. A brass key. A mystery he couldn't explain. That night, Jordan found him sitting alone by the window. Snowflakes drifted beneath the streetlights. Dad? Marcus looked up. Hey, buddy. Jordan climbed onto the couch. Are we okay? The question struck harder than any bill. Children always knew more than adults realized. Marcus pulled him closer. We're okay. Promise? Marcus hesitated. Just long enough. Jordan noticed. The boy lowered his eyes. They laughed at me today. Marcus frowned. Who? Some kids at school. His stomach tightened. What happened? Jordan shrugged. They said we're poor. The words landed heavily in the room. Simple. Cruel, honest. Marcus looked away, because he couldn't tell his son they were wrong. Jordan stared out the window. I told them you're a good man. Marcus blinked. The boy continued. I said you help people. A lump formed in Marcus's throat. And then what? Jordan smiled. I told them being good matters more than being rich. Silence filled the room. For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak. His son believed that. Truly believed it. The same way Marcus once had. Before life got complicated. Before bills and disappointments. Before the world taught him how expensive kindness could be. He hugged Jordan tightly. You're a smart kid. Jordan grinned. I know. The boy eventually drifted off to bed. But Marcus remained awake. Long after midnight. The key sat on the table before him. The apartment was silent. Only the ticking kitchen clock remained. Tick, tick, tick. Marcus picked up the key, turned it over. Again. And again. The mystery refused to leave him alone. Finally, he opened his laptop. He searched local news sites. The missing woman. No name released. No family identified. No new information. Nothing. That should have relieved him. Instead, it worried him more. Why would someone disappear without anyone claiming them? Why would a frightened old woman carry a key and warn strangers not to trust anyone? The questions multiplied. Sleep never came easily. When morning finally arrived, Marcus felt exhausted, and things quickly became worse. His phone rang just after 8. The hospital. Immediately, his heart dropped. Mr. Reed? Yes. This is Detroit General. Marcus stood. What happened? We need you to come in. The drive there felt endless. Bus transfers, walking through snow, waiting at crosswalks. Every minute stretched. By the time he reached the hospital, anxiety sat like a stone in his chest. The smell of disinfectant greeted him. Bright white lights reflected off polished floors. Doctors moved quickly through hallways. Marcus found his mother's room. She looked tired, paler than yesterday, but she smiled when she saw him. Don't look so scared. Marcus forced a laugh. A doctor entered moments later. The conversation was polite, professional, gentle, but the meaning was devastating. More tests, additional treatment, new medication, and costs. Always costs. Numbers again. More numbers. The doctor eventually left. Marcus remained standing beside the bed, staring at the floor. His mother touched his arm. I'm sorry. The words broke his heart. Because she sounded guilty, as if being sick was somehow her fault. Marcus sat beside her. You don't apologize for needing help. She smiled. Then neither should you. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Marcus's phone vibrated. A text message. Unknown number. His stomach tightened. He opened it. We need to talk. Nothing else, no name, no explanation, just 4 words. Marcus frowned. A second message arrived. About the woman. His pulse quickened immediately. A third message followed. Bus station. 3 p.m. Come alone. The room suddenly felt colder. His mother noticed his expression. What is it? Marcus locked the phone. Nothing. Another lie. Another terrible lie. But this time, he wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting her. 3 o'clock arrived beneath dark clouds and falling snow. The downtown bus station looked worn and tired. People hurried past carrying bags and coffee cups. Buses hissed as doors opened and closed. Marcus stood beneath a metal awning, watching, waiting. Every passing stranger seemed suspicious. Every glance felt important. Then he saw them. 2 men, dark coats, expensive shoes. Neither smiled, neither looked friendly. One carried a black envelope. The other scanned the area carefully. Searching. Marcus immediately knew. These weren't police, and they weren't reporters. The taller man approached first. Marcus Reed. Not a question. A statement. Marcus remained silent. The man nodded. Good. He held out the envelope. Marcus didn't take it. What's this? Help. The second man finally spoke. You need money. Marcus laughed once. Everybody needs money. The taller man smiled. But you need it more than most. The words stung, because they were true. The man pushed the envelope toward him. "Take it." Marcus looked inside. His breath caught. Cash. A lot of cash. Far more than he'd seen in one place in years. Hospital bills, medicine, rent, school fees. Every problem suddenly seemed solvable. For one dangerous moment. His hand almost moved. The man noticed. His smile widened. "See?" Marcus stared at the money, then thought about his mother. Jordan, the old woman, the fear in her eyes, and the warning she'd whispered. "Don't trust them." Slowly he closed the envelope, returning it. The smile vanished from the man's face. No. Silence. Snow drifted around them. The bus station noise faded into the background. The second man stepped forward. "You should think carefully." "I did." The man's expression hardened. "That money could save your family." Marcus looked directly at him. "What do you want?" The answer came immediately. "The key." His heart skipped. Neither man missed it. So they knew. They knew about the key. The taller man nodded calmly. "Give us the key, and forget the woman." Marcus took a slow breath. No. Silence. The air seemed to freeze. The second man's jaw tightened. The taller man sighed, as if disappointed. Then he leaned closer. Very close. Close enough that Marcus could smell expensive cologne. When he spoke, his voice remained soft, almost gentle, which somehow made the words worse. "You just chose the wrong family to protect." A chill moved through Marcus, not because of the threat, because of how calmly it was delivered. The men turned, walking away without another word, disappearing into the crowd. Marcus stood motionless. Snow gathered on his shoulders, his hands trembled, not from cold, from fear, real fear. For the first time since meeting the old woman, he understood something. This wasn't just a mystery anymore. This wasn't just about a missing woman. Powerful people wanted that key. Powerful people were willing to force for it. And if money failed, what would they try next? Marcus slipped a hand into his pocket, feeling the brass key. Still there. Still cold. Still waiting. And somewhere deep inside, a terrible realization began to form. Whatever door that key opened, it was worth far more than money. Marcus barely slept that night. Every creak in the apartment sounded different. Every passing car made him glance toward the window. The threat itself hadn't been loud. The man hadn't raised his voice, hadn't touched him, hadn't even looked angry. But somehow that made it worse. People who needed to prove their power usually shouted. People who already had power whispered, and those men had whispered. At 3 a.m, Marcus found himself sitting at the kitchen table again. The brass key rested beside a cup of cold coffee. Snow tapped softly against the window. The city outside looked distant and silent beneath layers of white. For a few minutes he simply stared at the key, trying to understand why a stranger had trusted him, trying to understand why powerful men wanted it, trying to understand why his life suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. Then he heard movement behind him. His mother stood in the hallway, wrapped in a faded blue robe. "You're awake again." Marcus forced a smile. "So are you." She walked slowly into the kitchen. Age and illness had changed the way she moved, but not the way she looked at him. A mother always knew when something was wrong. She sat across from him. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, she nodded toward the key. "That's what's keeping you up." Marcus looked down. He hadn't realized he left it sitting there. It's complicated. She smiled faintly. The most dangerous things usually are. He laughed quietly. You're supposed to tell me not to get involved. I raised you. Her eyes softened. You've never walked away from someone who needed help. Marcus sighed. Maybe that's the problem. His mother studied him carefully. Then she reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. No. Her voice was gentle. That's the reason you're still the man I respect most. The words settled deep inside him. For a moment the fear faded, only for a moment, because reality returned quickly. Hospital bills, lost income, threats, unknown enemies, the weight of everything waiting outside those apartment walls. The next morning brought another problem, a much bigger one. Marcus stepped outside shortly after sunrise. The sky hung low and gray above Detroit. The cold bit through his jacket. His old delivery car sat exactly where he'd parked it the night before. At least it had. Now the space was empty. Marcus stopped, blinking, certain he was looking at the wrong spot. But he wasn't. The cracked section of pavement, the rusted dumpster nearby, the broken streetlight. Everything else remained. Only the car was gone. His stomach dropped. He hurried toward the building manager's office. A handwritten notice sat taped to the door. Unauthorized vehicle towed. Outstanding city violation. Marcus stared at the words, then laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes life became so ridiculous that laughing was the only option left. That car was ancient, held together by hope and duct tape, but it was still his way to work, his independence, his chance to earn. Now it was gone too. By noon he was sitting inside another waiting room, another government office, another line of frustrated people. Nobody looked happy, nobody looked hopeful. Everyone stared at screens or floors. The clerk eventually called his number. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. The fees exceeded what Marcus had available, not by a little, by a lot. He left feeling hollow. Outside, snow had begun falling again. Large flakes drifted slowly through the air, covering cars, sidewalks, roofs. The city looked beautiful. Marcus felt miserable. His phone rang. Jordan's school. Immediately panic surged. He answered before the first ring ended. "Hello, Mr. Reed?" A secretary's voice. "Jordan isn't in trouble." Marcus exhaled, but not completely. Okay. He had a disagreement with another student. Marcus closed his eyes. Of course. The secretary continued. Nothing serious. But we thought you should know. After hanging up, Marcus stood motionless on the sidewalk. Everything seemed to be unraveling, one piece at a time, one problem after another, almost as if someone were removing every support beam from his life. By late afternoon, he finally arrived home, exhausted, cold, defeated. The apartment felt unusually quiet. Too quiet. His mother wasn't in the living room. She wasn't in the kitchen. A strange feeling crawled into his chest. Mom? No answer. He moved quickly toward her bedroom. The door stood partially open. She was sitting on the floor, one hand pressed against her chest. Immediately, Marcus dropped beside her. Mom! Her breathing sounded uneven. Pain flickered across her face. Fear hit him harder than anything else had all week. He grabbed his phone, called for medical assistance, spoke too fast, repeated the address twice. The next 20 minutes felt endless. Jordan stood frozen nearby, terrified, trying not to cry. Marcus wrapped an arm around him while keeping his eyes on his mother. When help finally arrived, Relief nearly brought him to tears. Hours later, he sat alone in a hospital corridor. White lights stretched endlessly overhead. Machines beeped in distant rooms. Nurses moved quietly through the halls. The world felt muted, like sound itself had grown tired. A doctor eventually approached. His mother's condition had stabilized, but additional treatment would be necessary. More appointments, more medication, more expenses, always more expenses. Marcus leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes. He wasn't sure how much more he could carry. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Reed?" He looked up. A nurse stood nearby, holding an envelope. "This was left for you." Marcus frowned. "For me?" She nodded. A man dropped it off. His pulse quickened. Immediately. The envelope felt expensive. Heavy paper. No return address. No name. Inside was a single photograph. Nothing else. Marcus stared at it. Confusion turned into shock. The picture showed him, leaving the diner, the night he met Eleanor. Someone had been watching. His stomach tightened. Then he turned the photo over. A handwritten message waited on the back. "We can see everything." His blood ran cold. For several seconds he couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe properly. Then another realization struck him. Whoever left this knew where he was. They knew about the hospital. They knew about his mother. They knew about him. The threat at the bus station suddenly felt much more real. Marcus shoved the photo into his pocket. His hands trembled. Not from fear alone, from anger. Because now this wasn't only about him. His family was involved. His mother. His son. People who had done nothing wrong. The hospital doors opened nearby. A gust of cold air swept through the hallway. Marcus glanced up and froze. Two familiar figures stood near the entrance. Dark coats, expensive shoes, the same men from the bus station. Watching him. Neither smiled. Neither waved. They simply stood there, waiting, as if they already knew he would notice them. Marcus slowly rose from his chair. The taller man nodded once, then turned toward the exit. The second man followed. No words, no confrontation, no explanation, just a reminder. We know where you are, we know who you love, and we are still watching. Marcus remained frozen long after they disappeared. His heart pounded against his ribs. Every instinct told him to walk away, to find the key, hand it over, protect his family, end this nightmare. It would be easy. One decision, one exchange, one surrender. But then he remembered Eleanor, the fear in her eyes, the way she held the soup bowl with shaking hands, the way she whispered her warning. If anyone asks about me, don't believe them. For the first time since all of this began, Marcus understood something important. The old woman hadn't been hiding from people who wanted money. She had been hiding from people who already had it, and that made them far more dangerous. The hospital room door opened behind him. A nurse stepped out. "Your mother is asking for you." Marcus nodded. He took one last look toward the entrance. The men were gone, but their shadow remained. Following him, waiting, growing larger. And somewhere beyond the hospital walls a storm was gathering. A storm much bigger than Marcus Reed ever imagined. Because at that very moment, several black SUVs were already moving through Detroit, and the man sitting in the back seat of the lead vehicle had only one question. Had Marcus Reed truly been the stranger who bought lunch for his mother? Because if the answer was yes, Everything was about to change. Marcus left the hospital just after sunrise. The sky above Detroit looked pale and exhausted, the kind of winter morning that made the entire city seem quieter than usual. His mother's condition had stabilized. That should have brought relief. Instead, his stomach remained tied in knots. The men at the hospital, the photograph, the threats, the missing woman, the key. Every problem seemed connected now. He just couldn't see how. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he walked toward the bus stop. His phone battery was nearly dead. His bank account was worse, and his future looked uncertain. For the first time in years, Marcus felt genuinely trapped. Not poor, not unlucky, trapped, as though invisible walls were slowly closing around him. By the time he reached his neighborhood, the weak morning sun reflected off rows of aging apartment buildings. The familiar streets looked unchanged. Children waited for school buses. A few elderly neighbors shoveled snow. Someone blasted old Motown music from a second-floor window. Life continued, as if nothing extraordinary was happening. Marcus climbed the stairs to his apartment. Jordan opened the door before he could knock. "Dad!" Marcus smiled immediately. No matter how bad life became, seeing his son always helped. "Hey, buddy." Jordan wrapped his arms around him, then stepped back. "You look tired." "I feel tired." Jordan nodded seriously. "Grandma okay?" Marcus hesitated, then smiled. "She's tougher than both of us." That answer seemed to satisfy him, for now. Inside, the apartment felt warmer than usual. Mrs. Henderson sat at the kitchen table drinking tea. Marcus blinked. "Mrs. Henderson." The elderly neighbor smiled nervously. "Oh, good. You're home." Something in her voice immediately felt wrong. Marcus set down his coat. "What happened?" Mrs. Henderson exchanged a glance with Jordan, then stood. "Maybe we should talk outside." His heart immediately dropped. Outside. The hallway suddenly felt too narrow, too quiet. "What is it?" Mrs. Henderson lowered her voice. "There are people looking for you." Marcus froze. "Who?" "I don't know." Her expression tightened. "But they aren't from around here." A chill traveled through him. The black-suited men. They found his building, his neighborhood, his family. Marcus looked toward the apartment door, toward Jordan. Fear settled heavily inside him. What did they want? They didn't say. Mrs. Henderson crossed her arms. But they were asking questions. What kind of questions? About you. Marcus remained silent. The old woman stepped closer. "I didn't tell them anything." Relief washed over him. "Thank you." She nodded, then added quietly, "But Marcus..." "What?" "There were a lot of them." The words landed heavily. A lot of them. Not two men. Not one car. Something bigger. Much bigger. Marcus spent the rest of the morning watching from the apartment window. Every unfamiliar vehicle made him tense. Every stranger on the sidewalk drew his attention. Jordan eventually sat beside him. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Are we hiding?" Marcus looked down. Children always noticed more than adults expected. He managed to smile. "No." Jordan didn't look convinced, but thankfully he didn't push further. Around noon, Marcus finally relaxed slightly. Maybe whoever was looking for him had moved on. Maybe... A sudden commotion outside interrupted the thought. Voices, car doors, people talking. Lots of people. Marcus moved toward the window. then stopped cold. Black SUVs, not one, not two, 6, maybe 7. The entire street seemed frozen. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Apartment doors opened. People stepped onto balconies. The vehicles looked completely out of place among the aging buildings and cracked sidewalks, like luxury yachts parked beside fishing boats. Marcus's pulse quickened. The convoy stopped directly in front of his building. Every single vehicle. Oh my God. Mrs. Henderson appeared beside him. "What did you do?" Marcus laughed nervously. "I honestly don't know." More doors opened. Men in dark coats stepped out. Professional, organized, disciplined. Not like the men who had threatened him. These people looked different, more polished, more official. Then the rear passenger door of the center SUV opened, and the entire street seemed to hold its breath. A tall, white-haired man stepped out. Elegant gray overcoat, expensive shoes, perfect posture. Even from 3 stories above, Marcus recognized him immediately. Everybody did. His face appeared on television constantly. Business magazines, news reports, charity events, billboards. Charles Whitmore, billionaire, industrial giant, one of the richest men in America. Mrs. Henderson gasped. "No." Marcus stared, unable to speak. Jordan looked confused. "Who's that?" Nobody answered, because nobody could quite believe what they were seeing. Charles Whitmore slowly surveyed the building, his expression calm, focused, purposeful. Then he began walking toward the entrance, straight toward Marcus. The apartment suddenly felt too small, too hot, too unreal. A knock echoed through the hallway moments later. Firm, polite, not threatening. Marcus swallowed hard. Another knock followed. Mrs. Henderson looked terrified. Jordan looked fascinated. Marcus moved toward the door. Every step felt strange, like walking through a dream. When he opened it, 2 men in dark coats stood outside. Behind them stood Charles Whitmore. The billionaire's blue eyes studied Marcus carefully. Not with arrogance, not with suspicion, with curiosity, almost gratitude. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Charles smiled, a tired smile, the kind carried by someone who hadn't slept much recently. "Marcus Reed?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes," Charles exhaled, as though he'd finally found something he'd been searching for. "Good." The billionaire extended his hand. "My name is Charles Whitmore." Marcus nearly laughed, as if anyone in America didn't know that. "I know." Charles nodded, then asked a question that changed everything. One simple question. One impossible question. One question that instantly explained why he had come. "Are you the man who bought lunch for my mother?" The hallway fell silent, completely silent. Mrs. Henderson's mouth opened. Jordan blinked repeatedly. Marcus felt the world tilt. "Your mother." The words echoed inside his head. The old woman, the diner, the soup, the warning, the key. Your mother. For several seconds he couldn't answer. Charles seemed to understand, because he spoke again, more softly this time. The elderly woman at the diner. Marcus finally nodded. "Yes." Something emotional flashed across the billionaire's face. Relief, pure relief, the kind a person feels after searching desperately for something precious. Charles looked away briefly, composing himself, then looked back. "May I come in?" 20 minutes later, Charles Whitmore sat at Marcus's small kitchen table. The contrast felt surreal. A billionaire drinking coffee from a chipped mug in a tiny apartment, beside peeling wallpaper. Jordan sat nearby, pretending not to listen. Mrs. Henderson had conveniently decided not to leave. Marcus couldn't blame her. He wouldn't have left either. Charles studied the room quietly. Photographs, bills, old furniture, evidence of a life built through struggle. Finally, he looked at Marcus. "My mother's name is Eleanor Whitmore." Marcus felt another shock. Whitmore? The same last name. Of course. How had he never considered it? Charles continued. "We've been searching for her for days." Marcus frowned. "She's missing." Yes. The billionaire's jaw tightened. And no. Marcus blinked. "What does that mean?" Charles leaned back slowly, choosing his words carefully. "My mother disappeared." A pause. "But she wasn't kidnapped." Marcus stared. Charles looked exhausted. "She left." The room grew quiet. Outside, snow continued falling, covering the city, covering secrets, covering lies. Charles folded his hands. "My mother has been trying to expose something." Marcus immediately thought of the men. The threats, the key. His pulse quickened. Charles noticed. "You know something." It wasn't an accusation, just an observation. Marcus hesitated. For the first time since all this started, he wasn't sure what to do. Could he trust this man? Could he trust anyone? As if reading his thoughts, Charles quietly reached into his coat pocket, then placed a photograph on the table. Marcus stared. It showed Eleanor. Younger, smiling, standing beside Charles. The resemblance was undeniable. Same eyes, same smile, same face. The billionaire's voice softened. "She's my mother." Marcus looked at the picture, then at Charles, then toward the pocket containing the brass key. And suddenly, one realization became impossible to ignore. The frightened old woman from the diner had never been poor, never been ordinary, never been forgotten. She belonged to one of the wealthiest families in America, which meant the danger surrounding her was even bigger than Marcus imagined. And somewhere out there, Eleanor Whitmore was still hiding. While powerful people searched for her, the same people who were now searching for him. Charles leaned forward, his expression serious. "Marcus." Marcus looked up. "If my mother trusted you..." The billionaire paused, then finished quietly. "I need to know why." And for the first time since the nightmare began, Marcus realized he might finally be close to the truth. The apartment felt unusually small, not because of the furniture, not because of the people, because suddenly the truth sitting at his kitchen table seemed too large for the room to contain. Charles Whitmore looked nothing like the ruthless billionaires Marcus had seen on television. There was no arrogance in him, no performance, no superiority, only exhaustion, the kind that came from carrying something heavy for a very long time. Outside, snow drifted quietly past the window. Inside, nobody spoke for several seconds. Jordan sat at the far end of the table pretending to do homework. Mrs. Henderson pretended to read a magazine. Neither fooled anyone. Charles finally broke the silence. "My mother trusted very few people." Marcus looked down at the photograph. The younger Eleanor smiled beside her son. Confident, elegant, happy. Nothing like the frightened woman from the diner. "What happened to her?" Marcus asked. Charles leaned back slowly. His eyes drifted toward the snow-covered street. For a moment he seemed lost in memories. "My mother helped build Whitmore Industries." Marcus blinked. You mean she worked there? Charles almost smiled. No. A pause. She helped create it. The room fell silent again. Marcus stared. Charles continued. My father became the public face of the company. Another pause. My mother built most of it. Marcus wasn't sure what surprised him more, the revelation itself, or the sadness in Charles's voice. Then why was she alone? Charles looked away. The question clearly hurt. Because success changes people. His fingers tightened around the coffee mug. It changed parts of our family. Outside, a snowplow rumbled down the street. The sound faded into the distance. Charles continued speaking. Years ago, Whitmore Industries had created one of the country's largest charitable foundations. Millions of dollars. Programs for poor families. Medical assistance. Scholarships. Community kitchens. Housing support. The foundation had become one of Eleanor's proudest achievements. Helping people had always mattered to her. More than board meetings. More than stock prices. More than wealth. Marcus listened carefully. Something about the story felt important. Very important. Then Charles said the words that changed everything. 3 months ago, my mother discovered money was disappearing. Marcus sat straighter. Stolen? Charles nodded. Millions. The word hung heavily in the room. Millions. Not thousands. Not hundreds of thousands. Millions. Money intended for people who needed help. Money intended for families like Marcus's. Charles looked exhausted. My mother started asking questions. A bitter smile crossed his face. Some people didn't appreciate that. Marcus immediately thought about the men in black coats, the threats, the photograph, the warning. The pieces were finally beginning to connect. Charles continued. People told her she was confused, old, paranoid. His jaw tightened. They tried convincing everyone she wasn't thinking clearly. Mrs. Henderson gasped softly. Charles nodded. At first it seemed harmless. Then his eyes darkened. But it wasn't. Marcus understood, because he'd seen it happen before. Maybe not to billionaires. Maybe not inside corporations. But he'd seen people ignored because they were old. Dismissed because they were poor. Overlooked because nobody wanted to hear uncomfortable truths. Charles rubbed his forehead. 2 weeks ago, she disappeared. Marcus immediately reached into his pocket. The brass key felt cold against his fingers. Charles noticed. Both men looked at each other. A silent understanding passed between them. Slowly, Marcus placed the key onto the table. The room seemed to stop breathing. Even Jordan looked up. Charles stared at it. For several seconds he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. Then he whispered, "Oh my God." Marcus swallowed. She gave it to me. Charles carefully picked up the key, as though it were something sacred, something fragile, something important. His hands trembled slightly. The billionaire looked more emotional than Marcus had expected. What did she say? Marcus repeated every word, the warning, the fear, the strange request, the way Eleanor had looked over her shoulder before leaving. Charles listened without interruption. When Marcus finished, silence returned. Then Charles slowly nodded. She found someone. Marcus frowned. What? Charles looked directly at him. The person she was looking for. I don't understand. A sad smile appeared. My mother believed character mattered more than status. He looked around the apartment, at the worn furniture, the faded paint. the unpaid bills. Then back at Marcus. She spent years surrounded by powerful people. A pause. Most disappointed her. Marcus wasn't sure what to say. Charles leaned forward. My mother used to tell me something. What? Never trust a person because they're rich. The billionaire smiled faintly. Trust them because they're kind when nobody is watching. The words settled heavily inside the room. Marcus looked away, suddenly uncomfortable, because nobody had ever described him that way. Kindness had never felt like an achievement. It was simply who he tried to be, even when life punished him for it. Charles carefully placed the key back on the table. I know where this goes. Marcus's eyes widened. You do? Charles nodded. A private storage box. His pulse quickened. The evidence? Possibly. The billionaire's expression darkened. If my mother managed to gather everything. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Marcus understood. Everything. The theft. The fraud. The names. The proof, all hidden behind a single lock. And the key to that lock sat between them. Suddenly Jordan spoke. The room jumped slightly. Dad? Marcus looked over. Yeah? The boy pointed toward the window. I think we're being watched. Every adult in the room froze. Charles stood immediately, moving toward the curtains. Marcus followed. Outside, across the street, a black sedan sat parked beside a snow-covered curb. The engine running. Dark windows. Motionless. Watching. The billionaire's face hardened instantly. One glance told him everything. That's not my security. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Charles reached into his coat, pulled out his phone, spoke quietly into it. 3 short sentences. Nothing more. Within minutes, 2 of the security personnel downstairs moved toward the vehicle. The sedan pulled away immediately, disappearing around the corner. Nobody in the apartment relaxed, because everyone understood what it meant. Someone else knew. Someone else was following the trail. Charles slowly returned to the table. His expression had changed. The warmth was still there. But now something else existed too. Urgency. They know she found someone. Marcus nodded. They threatened me. Charles looked up sharply. What? Marcus told him everything. The bus station, the envelope full of cash, the photograph, the hospital, the warnings. Every detail. By the time he finished, Charles looked furious. Not explosive. Controlled. The dangerous kind of angry. The kind powerful men become when they stop pretending. Finally, he spoke. Richard Hale. Marcus frowned. Who? Charles's jaw tightened. Our chief legal officer. The name meant nothing to Marcus, but the reaction meant everything. Charles stood, walking slowly toward the window again. He controls most of the foundation records. A pause. He also controlled access to my mother. Marcus suddenly understood. Not all of it, but enough. Richard Hale wasn't stealing alone. People like that never did. They built networks, protection, layers, and somewhere inside those layers, Eleanor had discovered the truth. Charles turned around. The key changes everything. His voice sounded different now, focused, certain. The moment we open that storage box, he paused, looking directly at Marcus. The game changes. The room grew quiet. Outside, snow continued falling, soft, silent, beautiful. Marcus looked toward his mother's empty chair, toward Jordan, toward the life he'd been trying so hard to protect. 3 days ago, his biggest concern had been grocery money. Now billionaires were sitting in his apartment. Powerful people were following him. And a missing old woman had somehow placed the fate of a massive corporation into his hands. It felt impossible. Yet it was happening. Charles picked up his coat. "We need to move quickly." Marcus stood. "Tonight?" The billionaire nodded. "Tonight." His pulse quickened. "Where?" Charles looked down at the brass key, then back at Marcus. "Grand Central Station." Marcus blinked. The train station? An old private vault beneath it. The billionaire's eyes narrowed. "My mother always loved hidden places." A faint smile appeared. "She once told me secrets survive longer underground." Marcus stared at the key, then at Charles, then toward the snow-covered city beyond the window. Somewhere beneath that city waited answers, and possibly danger. Maybe both. Charles moved toward the door, then stopped, turning back one final time. "Marcus, yeah?" The billionaire looked at him carefully. Not as a delivery driver, not as a stranger, not as a poor man from a forgotten neighborhood, but as someone important, someone trusted, someone chosen. "My mother didn't give that key to you by accident." The words landed heavily. Charles smiled faintly. She gave it to the one person who helped her without knowing who she was. Then he opened the door and left, leaving Marcus standing in silence, holding the key, holding the responsibility, holding the beginning of a truth powerful people had spent years trying to bury. And somewhere far away, inside a luxury office overlooking downtown Detroit, Richard Hale received a phone call. The voice on the other end spoke only 6 words. "We found the man with the key, for the first time in a long time." Richard Hale stopped smiling. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind him revealed Detroit glowing beneath the winter night. Thousands of lights, thousands of lives, thousands of people who had no idea that a storm was about to hit one of the city's most powerful corporations. Richard stood alone in his office, the phone still pressed against his ear. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. Calm, controlled, dangerous. The voice on the other end had already disconnected. It didn't matter. The message had been delivered. The man with the key had been found. And worse, Charles Whitmore had found him too. Richard slowly placed the phone on his desk, then walked toward the window. For years he had carefully built his position. Power, influence, money, control. He hadn't come this far to lose everything because of an old woman and a delivery driver. His jaw tightened. A cold smile returned. Not because he wasn't worried, because he was. And worried men often became the most dangerous. Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus sat in his apartment, unable to focus on anything. The key rested on the coffee table. The television played quietly in the background. Jordan had fallen asleep on the couch. Mrs. Henderson had finally gone home. The apartment felt peaceful, yet Marcus couldn't relax. Tomorrow night. The vault. The evidence, the truth. Everything seemed to be racing towards something bigger. His phone suddenly vibrated. Unknown number. Marcus frowned. Normally he would have ignored it. Instead, he answered. "Hello?" Silence. Then breathing. Very faint. Marcus straightened. "Hello?" A woman's voice finally spoke. Weak. Trembling. Familiar. "Marcus?" His heart nearly stopped. Eleanor? Silence. Then relief. Oh, thank God. Marcus immediately stood. Where are you? The line crackled. Background noise filled the call. Wind, traffic, a door slamming somewhere nearby. The old woman's voice sounded frightened. They found me. Fear surged through Marcus. Who? You know who. His grip tightened around the phone. Eleanor, where are you? I can't stay. The line crackled again. I only called because I needed to know something. Marcus listened carefully. What? A long pause followed. Then, do you still have the key? Marcus looked toward the coffee table. Yes. A breath of relief came through the speaker. Good. Eleanor, listen carefully. Her voice became urgent. The people around Richard aren't the only problem. Marcus froze. What do you mean? Another pause. Longer this time. Then rushed Charles. His stomach tightened. I do. Good. A noise sounded in the background. A man's voice. Distant. Searching. Eleanor immediately lowered her voice. They're close. Marcus's pulse quickened. Tell me where you are. No. What? If you know, they can make you tell them. Eleanor, promise me something. The fear in her voice stopped him. What? Whatever happens tomorrow. Another pause. Don't walk away. Marcus closed his eyes, because suddenly he understood. She wasn't worried about herself. She was worried about the truth. The truth mattered more. More than money. More than reputation. Maybe even more than safety. I promise. Eleanor exhaled softly. Thank you. The line disconnected. Marcus stood motionless. The room felt colder, somehow lonelier, because for the first time he realized how afraid Eleanor truly was, and yet she kept fighting. The next morning brought a completely different kind of pain. Humiliation. The kind that lingered. The kind that followed people home. Marcus's phone buzzed repeatedly before breakfast. Messages, notifications, missed calls. At first he didn't understand. Then he opened social media, and his stomach dropped. Someone had posted photographs of him. The diner, the hospital, the bus station, even his apartment building. A headline appeared beneath the images. Local delivery driver accused of scamming elderly woman. Marcus stared. Disbelief turned into anger. The article claimed he manipulated Eleanor, claimed he tricked her, claimed he was seeking money. The lies spread rapidly. Comments multiplied. Thousands of strangers sharing opinions, judging, mocking, condemning, people who knew nothing, yet spoke with certainty. Marcus felt sick. By noon, the damage had already spread. Jordan came home from school early. His face looked pale, his eyes red. Marcus immediately knew. What happened? The boy looked down. Nothing. A lie. A terrible lie. Marcus knelt beside him. Jordan. The boy's voice cracked. They showed me the pictures. Marcus closed his eyes. Pain washed through him. What pictures? You? Jordan swallowed hard. Kids said you're a criminal. The room became silent. Marcus couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Because this wasn't about him anymore. Again. It was reaching his son. Jordan wiped his eyes quickly, trying to look brave, trying to act older than he was. Marcus wrapped his arms around him, and for a moment neither said anything. Outside, snow drifted quietly through the afternoon. Inside, a father tried desperately to hold his world together. The hospital called an hour later. Another bill. Another reminder. Another number Marcus couldn't afford. By evening, he felt completely exhausted. Emotionally. Physically. Spiritually. Everything hurt. The apartment. The bills. The accusations. The fear. The uncertainty. Even the hope Charles had brought now felt fragile. As darkness settled over Detroit, Marcus returned to the hospital to visit his mother. The corridors glowed beneath harsh white lights. Machines beeped steadily. Visitors moved quietly through the halls. His mother immediately noticed something was wrong. "You look worse than I do." Marcus laughed softly. "Not possible." She smiled. Then her expression changed. "What happened?" Marcus hesitated, then told her. "Not everything. Just enough. The articles, the accusations. Jordan, the pressure." His mother's eyes filled with sadness. Not for herself. For him. After he finished speaking, silence lingered between them. Finally, she reached for his hand, the same way she had when he was a child. "When you were 9 years old." Marcus smiled faintly. "Here it comes. A childhood story." His mother continued. "You found a stray dog behind our building." Marcus laughed. "I remember." The dog had been skinny, hungry, terrified. His mother nodded. "You brought him home." "He bit me." "He did." Marcus smiled. Blood, tears, a trip to urgent care. He remembered it clearly. His mother squeezed his hand. "Did you stop helping him?" "No." "Why?" Marcus thought about it, because the answer seemed obvious. He was scared. His mother smiled softly. "Exactly." The room grew quiet. Then she said something Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. "Kind people always get hurt first." Marcus looked at her. "But eventually," she smiled, "they become the reason other people survive." Tears burned behind his eyes, because he wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe this suffering meant something. Wanted to believe all of it wasn't pointless. When Marcus finally left the hospital, night had fully arrived. The city glowed beneath neon lights and falling snow. He walked alone toward the parking garage where Charles's driver waited. Tomorrow they would go to the vault. Tomorrow they would open the box. Tomorrow the truth would finally emerge. At least that was the plan. Then his phone rang again. Charles Whitmore. Marcus answered immediately. "Charles." The billionaire's voice sounded tense. "Where are you?" "Leaving the hospital." A pause. Then, "We have a problem." Marcus stopped walking. "What happened?" Charles exhaled slowly. "Richard Hale knows about the vault." Marcus felt ice flood through his veins. "How?" "We don't know." The answer was worse than any explanation, because it meant someone was watching, listening, following. Charles continued. "I've doubled security. Is it enough?" A long silence followed, long enough to frighten Marcus. Finally, Charles answered. "I honestly don't know." Snow swirled around Marcus beneath the streetlights. The city suddenly felt much larger, much darker, much more dangerous. Charles's voice lowered. "Get home." "What?" "Don't stop anywhere." Marcus's pulse quickened. "Charles, just get home." The billionaire rarely sounded afraid. Tonight he did. The call ended. Marcus stood frozen for several seconds. then started walking faster. The garage sat only 2 blocks away. Yet every shadow suddenly looked suspicious. Every parked vehicle seemed threatening. Every stranger appeared dangerous. The city no longer felt familiar. Halfway to the garage, he noticed something. A black sedan, parked across the street. Engine running. Dark windows. Marcus slowed. The sedan remained motionless. Watching. Waiting. Just like before. His heartbeat accelerated. The passenger side door opened slightly. Not enough for someone to exit. Just enough to send a message. "We know where you are." Marcus turned away, walking faster. Snow crunched beneath his boots. The garage entrance appeared ahead. Almost there. Almost safe. Then his phone vibrated. A text message. Unknown sender. Only 6 words. "Look inside your mailbox tomorrow." Marcus stopped. Confusion replaced fear. His mailbox? Why? Who sent it? The black sedan pulled away, disappearing into the snowy night, leaving questions behind. Questions Marcus couldn't answer. Not yet. But deep down he felt it. Tomorrow wasn't only about the vault. Someone else was trying to reach him. Someone hiding. Someone watching. Someone connected to Eleanor. And whatever waited inside that mailbox might change everything again. Marcus barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the black sedan, the threats, the headlines, his mother's tired face, Jordan trying to be brave, and somewhere in the darkness, Eleanor Whitmore hiding from people powerful enough to make entire stories disappear. Before sunrise, Marcus was already awake. Snow coated the city in a blanket of white. The streets looked peaceful, almost innocent. But Marcus knew better. He dressed quietly and stepped into the freezing morning. The apartment building was silent. Only the distant sound of traffic echoed through the neighborhood. His mailbox sat near the front entrance. Old metal, paint peeling, nothing special. Yet his pulse quickened as he approached. The anonymous message echoed in his mind. "Look inside your mailbox tomorrow." Marcus slid the small door open. At first he saw nothing. Then his fingers touched an envelope. No stamp, no address, no name. Just a plain white envelope. His stomach tightened. He pulled it out carefully. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. Only one sentence had been typed. "She trusted you because you bought her lunch." Beneath the sentence was another line. "They trust money. She trusted character." Marcus stared, then flipped the paper over. Nothing. No signature. No explanation. But tucked behind the note was something else. A photograph. His breath caught. The picture showed Eleanor Whitmore. Not recently. Years ago. She stood beside dozens of children inside a community kitchen. She wasn't wearing expensive jewelry, wasn't dressed like a billionaire. She wore a simple apron, and she was smiling. The same warm smile Marcus remembered from the diner. Written on the back were 3 words: "Don't give up." Marcus swallowed hard. The handwriting looked shaky. Old. It was Eleanor's. Someone had delivered it recently. Someone who knew where he lived. Someone helping her. For the first time in days, a small spark of hope appeared. Eleanor was still fighting, which meant Marcus could not quit. Not now. Not when things were finally moving. By afternoon, a black SUV waited outside his apartment. This time, Marcus didn't panic. Charles Whitmore stepped out himself. The billionaire looked exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes, but determination burned in them. "You ready?" Charles asked. Marcus nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." Charles glanced at the envelope in Marcus's hand. "What's that?" Marcus showed him the photograph and note. For several seconds, Charles simply stared. Then emotion crossed his face. "My mother wrote that." Marcus nodded. "I thought so." Charles carefully touched the edge of the photograph. A small smile appeared. "She loved that kitchen." "What kitchen?" "The first community center we ever funded." His smile faded. Back when helping people mattered more than board meetings. The words lingered between them. Then Charles straightened. "Come on." Marcus climbed into the SUV. Detroit passed outside the windows. Snow-covered streets, factories, churches, neighborhoods. The city looked beautiful beneath the winter light. Yet Marcus barely noticed. His mind remained fixed on one thing: the key. Eventually, the skyline changed. The old train station appeared ahead. Massive, historic, grand. Its stone walls rose above the city like a forgotten castle. Marcus had driven past it many times, never imagining he would enter it, never imagining answers waited beneath it. Security personnel already stood near a side entrance. Charles led the way. The station's interior felt enormous. Marble floors, towering ceilings, echoing footsteps. History lingered in every corner. Yet they weren't headed toward the public areas. Instead, Charles guided him down a narrow hallway, then another, then a staircase, and another. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became. Eventually, they reached a steel door, heavy, old, secure. Charles pulled out a keycard. The lock clicked. The door opened. Cold air drifted out. Beyond it lay a private vault area. Rows of storage boxes stretched into the distance. Marcus stopped walking. The place felt different, almost sacred, like secrets lived here. Charles checked a small paper, then pointed. "There. Box 318. Marcus looked down at the brass key in his hand. The key that had changed everything. The key Eleanor trusted him to protect. His fingers trembled slightly. Charles noticed. "Nervous?" Marcus laughed softly. "Terrified." The billionaire smiled. "Good." "What?" "Means you're taking it seriously?" They approached the box together. The number matched. For a moment, neither man moved. The silence felt enormous. Then Marcus inserted the key. It fit perfectly. A click echoed through the room. Both men froze. The lock released. Marcus slowly opened the compartment. Inside wasn't money, wasn't jewelry, wasn't treasure. It was something far more powerful. Documents. Dozens of them. Folders, letters, financial statements, photographs, audio recordings. And resting on top of everything was a sealed envelope. Charles immediately recognized the handwriting. His mother's. His expression changed. "Open it." Marcus carefully broke the seal. The letter contained only a single page. The handwriting wavered in places, as though Eleanor had written it while afraid, or while running out of time. Marcus began reading aloud. "If you're reading this, it means I failed to bring the truth into the light myself." The room fell silent. Even the security personnel stepped back, giving them space. Marcus continued. "I know people will tell lies about me. I know they will say I am confused, old, unwell. Perhaps they will say worse." The words felt painfully personal, because those exact lies had already begun. Charles looked away. His jaw tightened. Marcus kept reading. "I am leaving these documents because facts do not grow old. Truth does not forget. And character matters more than status. Marcus paused. His throat tightened unexpectedly. The next lines hit even harder. To the person who opened this box. If you are not my son, then you are someone I trusted. That means you helped me without asking who I was. The room seemed to disappear. Only Eleanor's voice remained. Only her words. Only her faith. Marcus continued reading. I chose you because kindness given to strangers is the rarest kind. Most people help those who can repay them. You helped an old woman nobody respected. That tells me everything I need to know. Charles lowered his head. His eyes glistened. Marcus swallowed hard, then read the final paragraph. If the world tries to make you feel small, remember this. Never let powerful people convince you that decency is weakness. It isn't. It is the strongest thing left in this world. The letter ended. Silence filled the vault. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. For several seconds, Marcus simply stared at the page. A lifetime of being overlooked flashed through his mind. The jobs, the insults, the assumptions, the doors closed in his face. And yet somehow, this woman had seen him. Not his clothes, not his income, not his neighborhood. Him. Charles quietly wiped his eyes, then looked at the remaining contents. We should see what else is here. Marcus nodded. Together they began sorting through the files. The evidence appeared overwhelming. Bank transfers, internal memos, financial records, names, dates, signatures, millions of dollars redirected away from charity programs, millions intended for sick families, hungry children, community centers, everything traced back toward a small group of executives. And one name appeared repeatedly. Richard Hale. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. There he is. Charles nodded grimly. There he is. Then Marcus discovered something else. A photograph tucked between two folders. At first it seemed ordinary, just Eleanor standing beside several children. Then he noticed the date. Recent. Very recent. Only weeks old. On the back, Eleanor had written another message. This one directed specifically to Charles. My son, if you find this, remember what we built. Protect people, not reputations. Charles stared at those words for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded different, stronger, more certain. I know what I have to do. Marcus nodded. The evidence was real. The proof existed. The truth had survived. But as relief began settling over them, one of Charles's security officers suddenly approached, his expression tense. Sir. Charles looked up. What is it? The guard held out a phone. You're going to want to see this. Charles took it. His face immediately hardened. Marcus stepped closer. What happened? The billionaire slowly lowered the screen, his eyes dark, cold, focused. Richard Hale had just announced an emergency charity gala for the following evening, a massive public event, televised, packed with investors, board members, media outlets, powerful people. Marcus frowned. Why now? Charles looked directly at him. Because both men instantly understood. Richard knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to realize the truth was coming. Enough to prepare. Enough to fight back. Charles folded Eleanor's letter carefully, then looked at Marcus. The next move won't happen in a vault. His voice was calm, determined. It'll happen in front of the entire world. And suddenly Marcus realized the battle wasn't ending. It was only getting started. The drive back from the station felt very different from the drive there. A few hours earlier, Marcus had been chasing answers. Now he was carrying them, Boxes of documents, copies of financial records, audio recordings, letters written by Eleanor Whitmore herself. Enough evidence to shake one of the most powerful corporations in America. Yet instead of feeling relieved, Marcus felt uneasy. Because powerful people rarely surrendered quietly. Snow drifted across the windshield as Charles drove through downtown Detroit. The city lights blurred against the glass. For several minutes, neither man spoke. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "You think Richard knows?" Charles didn't hesitate. "He knows something." Marcus looked out the window. Then why would he host a charity gala tomorrow? Charles's expression hardened. Because desperate people make public moves. What kind of move? The kind that lets them control the story before someone else does. Marcus nodded slowly. That made sense. For weeks, Richard Hale had hidden behind lawyers, executives, and carefully crafted statements. Now he was stepping into the spotlight himself, which meant he was worried. And worried men made mistakes. Charles glanced toward Marcus. "He'll expect me." Marcus frowned. "But not me." A small smile appeared on Charles's face. Exactly. The following day arrived gray and cold, the kind of winter afternoon that seemed to drain color from the world. Marcus spent the morning at the hospital. His mother was resting. The medication had helped. For the first time in weeks, her breathing looked easier. She smiled when he entered. Tired eyes. Marcus laughed softly. "Been a long week. A long life, baby." That earned another laugh. Then her expression became serious. "You're carrying something heavy." Marcus sat beside her bed. He thought about telling her everything. The billionaire, the missing woman, the conspiracy, the evidence. Instead, he simply squeezed her hand. "I'm trying to do the right thing." His mother smiled. "Then you're already winning." The words stayed with him long after he left. Later that afternoon, Marcus returned home. Jordan sat at the kitchen table doing homework. The boy looked up immediately. "Dad?" "Yeah? You gonna be on TV tonight?" Marcus nearly choked. "What?" Jordan grinned. "Everybody's talking about some fancy charity event." Marcus laughed despite himself. "I don't think anyone wants to see me on television." Jordan studied him. "Grandma says people notice good people eventually." Marcus froze. The words sounded uncomfortably accurate. Maybe too accurate. He kissed Jordan's forehead, then headed toward his room. A garment bag hung from the closet door. Charles had sent it earlier. Inside waited the most expensive suit Marcus had ever seen. Dark navy, perfectly tailored, elegant without being flashy. Marcus stared at it, then laughed quietly. A delivery driver from the east side of Detroit, preparing for a billionaire's gala. Life had become strange, very strange. By evening, downtown Detroit glowed beneath thousands of lights. Luxury cars lined the streets. Valets hurried through the cold. Camera flashes illuminated the entrance of the Grand Windsor Hotel. The building rose above the city like a palace. Massive crystal chandeliers sparkled behind towering glass windows. Inside, wealth seemed to flow through every hallway. Marcus had never seen anything like it. As he stepped from Charles's SUV, nervousness hit him all at once. The suit helped, but it didn't erase years of feeling out of place. It didn't erase memories. The jobs where people assumed he didn't belong. The restaurants where servers ignored him. The meetings where nobody listened until someone wealthier repeated his idea. Those memories followed him through the hotel doors. The ballroom looked breathtaking. Golden light reflected from crystal fixtures overhead. String music drifted softly through the room. Men in tuxedos, Women in designer gowns, champagne glasses, perfect smiles, perfect conversations, perfect appearances. Marcus instantly felt every eye on him. Some people recognized him, others didn't. But many noticed he didn't fit their picture of who belonged there. Whispers followed him. Quiet, subtle, yet impossible to miss. A woman glanced at his suit before asking another guest whether he worked for catering. A man looked him up and down before checking for a name badge. Another guest stared long enough to make Marcus uncomfortable. Old feelings returned. The familiar feeling of being tolerated rather than welcomed. Charles noticed immediately. "You okay?" Marcus forced a smile. "Yeah." Charles raised an eyebrow. "No, you're not." Marcus sighed. "Feels like high school all over again." Charles glanced around the room. His expression darkened. "Then they're the ones with the problem." Marcus appreciated that. More than Charles probably realized. Still, it didn't make the room easier. Across the ballroom, cameras flashed. A crowd gathered near the stage. Richard Hale had arrived. The attorney looked exactly as Marcus remembered. Confident, polished, expensive. His smile appeared effortless. But Marcus noticed something different tonight. The confidence looked forced. The smile never reached his eyes. Richard was nervous. Not visibly, not enough for most people to notice. But Marcus noticed, and apparently Charles did too, because the billionaire leaned closer. "He knows." Marcus nodded. Richard spent the next hour shaking hands, giving interviews, posing for photographs, talking about generosity, talking about community, talking about integrity. Every word felt ironic. Marcus watched guests applaud. Many of them had no idea that millions intended for struggling families had vanished. No idea that the man speaking about compassion had helped steal resources from people who desperately needed them. Eventually, Richard took the stage. The room quieted. He adjusted the microphone, smiled, and began speaking. "Tonight is about service." Marcus nearly laughed. Richard continued. "Tonight is about helping those who have been forgotten." Charles crossed his arms. The irony had become almost unbearable. Then Richard shifted topics. His eyes scanned the crowd, slowly, carefully, until they landed on Marcus. For a split second, neither man looked away. Then Richard smiled, a dangerous smile. "Unfortunately," he continued, "charity also attracts opportunists." The room grew still. Marcus felt the shift instantly. Richard wasn't speaking generally anymore. He was aiming at someone. Him. People who seek attention. People who create stories. People who manipulate public sympathy. Several guests exchanged confused looks. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Charles's jaw clenched. Richard continued speaking, never mentioning Marcus by name, yet making the target obvious. "The truth matters. Facts matter. And we must be careful who we choose to trust." A few people nodded. Others looked uncertain. Marcus suddenly understood. This gala wasn't about charity. It was a trap. Richard intended to destroy his credibility before the evidence surfaced. If nobody believed Marcus, the truth could die with him. For a brief moment, doubt crept into Marcus's mind. Maybe he should leave. Maybe he wasn't built for this world. Maybe people like Richard always won because they understood power better. The thought lingered. Then another memory appeared. An old woman sitting alone in a diner, mocked, ignored, humiliated, and still dignified. Eleanor hadn't quit. Neither would he. Richard finished speaking. Applause filled the ballroom. Then he stepped off stage, straight toward Marcus. The crowd parted. Conversations faded. The room seemed to hold its breath. Richard stopped only a few feet away. His smile remained perfectly controlled. "Mr. Reed." Marcus met his gaze. "Mr. Hale." Several nearby guests pretended not to listen, which only made it more obvious they were listening. Richard chuckled. "You clean up well?" Marcus said nothing. Richard leaned slightly closer. "Enjoying your 15 minutes?" Charles stepped forward immediately, but Marcus lifted a hand. He wanted to answer himself. "I wasn't looking for attention." Richard's smile widened. "No?" "No." Marcus looked directly into his eyes. "I was looking for the truth." For the first time that evening, Richard's expression flickered. Only briefly, but enough. Marcus saw it. Fear. Tiny. Hidden. But real. Richard recovered instantly. Careful. His voice softened. Almost friendly. Sometimes people find things they don't understand. Marcus replied without hesitation. And sometimes people hide things they hope nobody finds. Silence. Heavy silence. The tension between them became impossible to ignore. Around them, wealthy guests stopped pretending not to watch. Everyone sensed something. Maybe not the details, but something important. Something dangerous. Richard straightened his jacket, then smiled once more. "Enjoy the evening." He turned and walked away. But his calm appearance fooled nobody now, especially Marcus. Because for the first time since this entire nightmare began, Richard Hale looked worried. Very worried. Charles exhaled slowly. "You rattled him." Marcus watched Richard disappear into the crowd. "No." A strange calm settled over him. "I think the truth rattled him." Across the ballroom, Richard spoke quietly into someone's ear, then glanced toward the stage, toward the cameras, toward the audience. And Marcus suddenly understood. The real confrontation hadn't happened yet. Richard was preparing something. One final move. One final attempt to control the narrative. One final gamble. And whatever happened next would unfold in front of every camera in the room. For a few seconds, the ballroom felt strangely still. The music had stopped. Conversations had faded. Even the waiters seemed frozen between tables. Richard Hale stood near the stage, smiling for the crowd, while quietly speaking into the ear of one of his assistants. Marcus watched him carefully. Something was coming. He could feel it. The same way people feel a storm before the first thunder arrives. Charles felt it too. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. Marcus nodded. Across the ballroom, television crews adjusted their equipment. Photographers moved toward the stage. The evening host returned to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for supporting the Whitmore Community Fund." Polite applause filled the room. The host continued. "We have one final presentation before tonight's special announcement." Marcus glanced at Charles. "What announcement?" Charles frowned. "There isn't supposed to be one." That was all Marcus needed to hear. Richard had changed something. The giant screen behind the stage flickered to life. Images appeared. Children receiving school supplies, volunteers serving meals, community centers, smiling faces. The crowd relaxed. The charity message seemed harmless. Then suddenly the images changed. A photograph of Marcus appeared. Large, bright, impossible to miss. The entire room gasped. Marcus froze. Another photo appeared, then another. Pictures taken from social media, pictures of his apartment building, pictures of him making deliveries, pictures of him standing outside the hospital. A cold feeling slid down his spine. Someone had been watching him. The audience murmured, confused, uncomfortable. Then Richard Hale calmly walked onto the stage. He didn't ask permission. He simply took the microphone. The room instantly quieted. "Good evening." His voice was smooth, controlled, professional. The voice of a man who had spent decades manipulating rooms exactly like this one. "I apologize for this unexpected interruption." Marcus felt Charles stiffen beside him. Richard continued. "But recent events have forced us to address certain concerns." The screen displayed another image of Marcus. Richard smiled sadly, as if he hated what he was about to do. "As many of you know, false accusations have recently been made against members of our organization." The crowd listened. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Richard lowered his head slightly. "And unfortunately, those accusations appear to center around a man seeking attention." Marcus felt every eye in the room turn toward him. His chest tightened, not because he was afraid, because he had lived this moment before. Different faces, different rooms, same feeling. The feeling of being judged before being heard. Richard continued. "This individual has inserted himself into private family matters." The screen showed Marcus entering the diner. Security footage. Someone had obtained it. He has repeatedly approached members of the Whitmore family. More photos. More footage. Marcus helping Eleanor. Marcus entering Charles's office. Marcus leaving the train station. Everything carefully arranged. Everything designed to tell one story. A dangerous story. A story that painted Marcus as a manipulator. A grifter. An opportunist. Richard spread his hands. "I ask you one simple question." He paused. "If a stranger suddenly appeared in your family during a time of crisis," his eyes found Marcus, "wouldn't you be suspicious too?" Several people exchanged uncertain looks. Some nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. Marcus could see the strategy now. Richard wasn't trying to prove anything. He was creating doubt. Just enough doubt to poison the truth. Charles suddenly stepped forward, but Marcus touched his arm. "Wait." Charles looked surprised. Marcus kept his eyes on the stage. "Let him finish." Richard smiled, believing he had control, believing the room belonged to him, believing Marcus would stay silent. The attorney continued. "I understand why some people sympathize with Mr. Reed." The giant screen showed Marcus standing beside his son. A private photo. One that should never have been public. Marcus felt anger rise inside him. Not for himself, for Jordan. Richard kept talking. "He has faced challenges. He has struggled, and we all wish him well." The fake sympathy sounded worse than open hostility. Then came the final blow. The screen displayed Marcus's financial records, hospital bills, late payments, debt notices. The room gasped. Someone whispered. Someone else looked away. Richard sighed dramatically. "And isn't it convenient?" His voice softened. "That a man facing financial hardship suddenly finds himself connected to a billionaire family?" The implication landed exactly as intended. Marcus heard it. Everyone heard it. The suggestion that he had helped Eleanor for money. The suggestion that every act of kindness had been calculated. The suggestion that none of it had been real. Silence spread across the ballroom. Heavy, painful silence. Marcus stared at the screen, at the hospital bills, at the unpaid balances, at the evidence of every struggle he had tried to carry with dignity. For a moment, old wounds reopened, the years of being overlooked, the years of being underestimated, the years of people assuming they knew who he was. His mother had once told him something. People will judge your pockets before they ever see your heart. Standing in that ballroom, Marcus finally understood exactly what she meant. Richard looked satisfied. He thought he had won. The crowd seemed uncertain, confused, divided, exactly where he wanted them. Then a new voice broke the silence. A frail voice, an elderly voice, a voice nobody expected. That's enough. The room froze. Every head turned. At the rear entrance of the ballroom, a wheelchair slowly emerged. An elderly woman sat in it, her silver hair neatly brushed, her posture proud, her eyes sharp despite everything she had endured. Eleanor Whitmore. The entire room erupted. Gasps, whispers, shock. Some guests even stood. Charles looked stunned. Marcus stared. He hadn't expected this. Nobody had. Eleanor had insisted on resting. The doctors had warned against stress. Yet here she was. The crowd parted as she moved forward. The wheelchair rolled slowly toward the stage. Richard's face lost color. For the first time all evening, he looked genuinely afraid. Eleanor stopped directly below the stage. The room became silent again. She looked up at Richard, not with anger, not with hatred, with disappointment, the kind that hurts far more. You've spoken long enough. Richard tried to recover. Eleanor, I think you're confused. No. Her voice cut through the room. Clear, strong. I'm finally seeing things clearly. Applause broke out, scattered at first, then louder. Richard gripped the microphone. Eleanor, these people are manipulating you. The old woman laughed softly, a sad laugh. The man who bought me lunch? She pointed toward Marcus. The man who gave away money he didn't have? The man who sat beside me when everyone else looked away? She shook her head. No. Then she looked around the ballroom, at the donors, the executives, the reporters, the cameras. That man didn't know my name. Her voice trembled slightly. He didn't know I had money. He didn't know I had influence. He thought I was a homeless old woman. The room listened. Every word mattered, and he helped me anyway. The silence became emotional. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Eleanor pointed directly at him. When I was hungry, he fed me. When I was humiliated, he stood beside me. When I was afraid, he protected me. Tears appeared in several eyes throughout the room. Even people who had doubted him moments earlier seemed uncomfortable now. Eleanor turned back toward Richard. You keep asking people to be suspicious. She nodded slowly. That's because you think everyone is like you, the crowd gasped. Richard opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Eleanor continued. But Marcus Reed never asked who I was. He never asked what I could give him. He simply treated me like a human being. The ballroom exploded into applause. Louder this time. Longer. Real. Marcus lowered his head. The emotion hit harder than he expected. Because all his life, recognition had been rare. People noticed mistakes. They noticed failures. They noticed skin color. They noticed poverty. Very few noticed character. Yet tonight, an entire room was hearing the truth. Not Richard's version. The real one. Eleanor looked toward the cameras, then toward Charles, then finally toward Marcus. A small smile touched her face, and for the first time since that day inside the diner, Marcus saw peace in her eyes. But then Eleanor reached into her purse, pulled out a folded envelope, and raised it slightly. The smile disappeared. Her expression became serious again. Very serious. There's something else. The room immediately quieted. Charles frowned. What is it, Mom? Eleanor looked at the envelope, then at Richard. Richard's face turned pale, so pale that even the reporters noticed. Eleanor spoke slowly. I kept one final piece of evidence hidden. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. Charles stared. Marcus stared. Even Richard stopped pretending. The envelope trembled slightly in Eleanor's hand. This letter was written the day before my husband died. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And if what's inside is true... She looked directly at Richard. Then everything we thought we knew about this company is wrong. The ballroom fell into complete silence, because suddenly everyone understood. The story wasn't over, not even close. And whatever was inside that envelope had the power to destroy far more than Richard Hale. The ballroom stood frozen. Hundreds of people stared at the small envelope in Eleanor Whitmore's trembling hand. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the photographers seemed afraid to press their camera buttons. The silence felt heavier than any speech. Richard Hale's face had become almost colorless. Marcus noticed it immediately. For weeks, Richard had hidden behind confidence, behind lawyers, behind power, behind expensive suits and carefully chosen words. But now that mask was slipping, and everyone could see it. Charles slowly stepped closer to his mother. Mom. His voice was gentle. What is it? Eleanor looked down at the envelope. Her fingers brushed across the worn paper. For a moment, she seemed lost in memories. Years of memories. Years of mistakes. Years of things left unsaid. Then she looked up, directly into her son's eyes. Your father gave this to me 3 days before he died. A murmur spread across the room. Charles froze. His father had been gone for nearly 15 years, yet somehow the man was still taping events from beyond the grave. Eleanor continued. He told me to keep it hidden. Her voice trembled. He said there might come a day when the wrong people gained too much control. Richard suddenly stepped forward. Eleanor. His voice sounded forced. We shouldn't do this here. The old woman turned toward him. For the first time all evening, anger flashed across her face. No. The single word landed like a hammer. You've spent years deciding where the truth should and shouldn't be spoken. Richard opened his mouth. Eleanor didn't let him continue. Not anymore. The crowd erupted into applause, brief but powerful. Richard's jaw tightened. He wasn't losing control anymore. He had already lost it. Charles gently took the envelope. His hands shook. Marcus noticed that too. For all his wealth, for all his influence, for all the power attached to the Whitmore name, Charles was still just a son standing beside his mother. A son about to hear one of the final messages left by his father. Slowly, he opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter. Several pages. Handwritten. The sight alone seemed to affect him. Charles immediately recognized the handwriting. His father's. The room waited. Charles swallowed hard, then began reading. My dear Eleanor. The ballroom became completely silent. If you're reading this, it means I was right to worry. A chill moved through the crowd. Charles continued. There are people inside our company who value power more than purpose. The words felt strangely alive despite their age, as if they had been written yesterday. I have spent months reviewing internal records. Charles's voice grew quieter. And I fear some of the men closest to our organization are not who they pretend to be. Richard lowered his head. Marcus saw sweat forming near his collar. Charles kept reading. I have documented irregular financial transfers, hidden accounts, and unauthorized decisions affecting our charitable programs. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. The room was hearing confirmation directly from the founder himself. Not rumors, not accusations, not opinions, evidence, history, truth. Then Charles reached the final paragraph and suddenly stopped. His face changed. The room noticed immediately. Everyone noticed. Eleanor looked frightened. What is it? Charles stared at the page. For several seconds he couldn't speak. Finally he looked up. His eyes filled with disbelief. He named them. The room erupted into whispers. Charles slowly raised the letter. My father listed every executive he suspected. Reporters immediately rushed closer. Camera lights flashed. Richard took a step backward, then another, then another. The movement was small, but Marcus saw it. The first instinct of a man looking for an escape. Charles continued reading names, one after another. Several executives sitting near the front visibly flinched. Some looked stunned. Others looked terrified. One man quietly left his chair. Security immediately blocked the exit. The crowd gasped. Everything was unraveling. Years of secrets, years of lies, years of carefully protected corruption, coming apart in a single night. Then Charles read the final name, the final person listed by his father. The room held its breath. Richard Hale. Silence. Absolute silence. Richard closed his eyes. Only for a moment. But it was enough. Everyone saw it. Everyone understood. The game was over. For several seconds nobody moved. Then applause erupted, louder than before. Not celebration. Relief. Relief that the truth had finally been spoken. Relief that the lies had finally reached daylight. Richard looked around the ballroom, at the cameras, at the reporters, at the executives, at the guests, at the evidence, at the letter, at Eleanor, at Charles. Finally, his eyes landed on Marcus, the man he had tried hardest to destroy. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Richard laughed. Not a happy laugh, not even an angry one. A tired laugh. The laugh of someone who realizes the ending has already been written. You know what's funny? His voice echoed across the room. No one answered. Richard smiled bitterly. All of this. He gestured around the ballroom. The company, the money, the board, the power. His eyes moved toward Marcus, and the person who brought it down wasn't a lawyer. He laughed again. It wasn't an investigator. It wasn't a politician. His expression hardened. It was a delivery driver. The room remained silent. Richard shook his head. One lunch. He stared at Marcus. One lunch. Marcus met his gaze calmly. That's all it took. Richard laughed one final time. Then security approached. No resistance. No arguments. No dramatic speeches. Just a tired man finally facing consequences. As he was escorted away, cameras followed every step. The ballroom watched. The reporters watched. The executives watched. But Marcus found himself watching Eleanor. Because she wasn't looking at Richard. She wasn't looking at the cameras. She wasn't looking at the crowd. She was looking at her son, Charles. And for the first time since Marcus had met her, she looked completely at peace. The applause slowly faded. The crowd settled. The reporters continued working. But something fundamental had changed. The tension was gone. Not entirely. There would still be investigations, court hearings, audits, headlines, months of difficult work ahead. But the fear was gone. Truth had finally entered the room, and truth had stayed. Charles folded the letter carefully, then turned toward the audience. His voice sounded different now, stronger, more personal. Tonight wasn't supposed to happen this way. A few people laughed softly. Even Eleanor smiled. Charles nodded. But maybe it happened exactly the way it needed to. His eyes found Marcus. The entire room followed his gaze. Suddenly, Marcus became very aware of hundreds of people looking at him. Again. Only this time felt different. Very different. Charles stepped down from the stage, walked through the crowd, and stopped directly in front of Marcus. The ballroom grew quiet once more. "What are you doing?" Marcus whispered. Charles smiled. The billionaire extended his hand. "No." Then he shook his head. "That's not enough." Before Marcus could react, Charles wrapped both arms around him. The room gasped, then applauded, then stood. One table after another. Guests rose to their feet. Reporters lowered cameras. Executives clapped. Employees clapped. Even some people who had doubted Marcus only an hour earlier joined in. A standing ovation for a delivery driver. Marcus felt emotion rise unexpectedly. His throat tightened. His eyes burned. Because all his life he had worked, sacrificed, endured, helped, given. And most of it had gone unnoticed. Not because he wanted praise, but because being invisible hurts, even when you're used to it. Charles stepped back. His voice cracked slightly. "You saved my mother." The room became silent again. Not because she was rich, not because you expected anything, but because you saw a human being. Charles glanced toward Eleanor, then back toward Marcus. "My father built this company." His voice grew stronger. "But tonight," he looked directly into Marcus's eyes, "you reminded us why it was built." Marcus couldn't speak. For several seconds he simply stood there, trying to absorb everything. The applause, the emotion, the moment, the journey, the diner, the lunch, the key, the threats, the fear, all of it leading here. Then Eleanor slowly rolled closer. She reached out her hand. Marcus immediately took it. The old woman smiled. A warm smile. A grandmother's smile. A mother's smile. A survivor's smile. "My boy." Her voice was soft. "But we're not finished yet." Marcus laughed through the emotion. "What now?" Eleanor squeezed his hand and smiled wider. "Oh!" She glanced at Charles, then back at Marcus. "Now we start fixing what was broken." And somehow, for the first time since this impossible journey began, that future no longer sounded frightening. It sounded hopeful. For the first time in weeks, Marcus slept through the night. No mysterious phone calls, no threatening messages, no fear that someone might be watching his apartment from across the street. No anxiety every time a black SUV slowed near the curb. Just silence. Peaceful silence. The kind most people take for granted. Morning sunlight slipped through the curtains of his small apartment. Detroit looked different that day. Not because the city had changed, because Marcus had. He sat quietly at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. Across from him, Jordan worked on a school project. His mother hummed softly while preparing breakfast. Simple sounds. Ordinary sounds. Sounds Marcus had almost forgotten how to appreciate. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Jordan looked up. "Dad?" Marcus smiled. "Yeah?" The boy grinned. "You're famous." Marcus nearly spit out his coffee. His mother burst into laughter. Jordan slid his phone across the table. Marcus looked down. News clips, interviews, photos from the gala. Headlines. Delivery driver exposes corporate scandal. Ordinary man saves billionaire's mother. The lunch that changed everything, Marcus groaned. Jordan laughed harder. His mother shook her head. "You deserve every bit of it." Marcus wasn't so sure. The attention still felt strange. He hadn't done any of this to become known. He had simply helped a hungry old woman, that was all. Or at least it had started that way. A knock interrupted breakfast. 3 sharp taps. Everyone froze. Old habits. Old fears. Marcus stood, walked to the door, opened it, and found Charles Whitmore standing outside. No bodyguards. No cameras. No assistants. Just Charles. Holding a paper bag. Marcus blinked. Charles lifted the bag. "Breakfast." Marcus laughed. "You know we already have breakfast." "Good." Charles smiled. "Then we can have second breakfast." Jordan immediately approved. Within minutes, everyone sat around the small table. A billionaire, a retired nurse, a teenage boy, and a former delivery driver, sharing pastries and coffee. The scene felt almost ridiculous, yet strangely natural. Charles seemed more relaxed than Marcus had ever seen him. Less like a billionaire, more like a son who had nearly lost his mother. Eventually, his expression became serious. "There are some things we need to discuss." Marcus nodded. He expected that. Charles reached into his coat pocket, removed an envelope, and slid it across the table. Marcus immediately frowned. "No." Charles sighed. "We haven't even talked about it. I know what's inside." "Do you?" "It's money." Charles smiled. "Fair point." Marcus pushed the envelope back. "I didn't help Eleanor for money." "I know." "Then don't make this weird." Jordan nearly choked, trying not to laugh. Charles laughed too. Then his expression softened. "Marcus." His voice became quieter. "My mother wouldn't be alive without you." Marcus looked away. The truth was harder to accept than people realized. Helping someone felt easy. Being praised for it felt uncomfortable. Charles continued, "You paid for her meal when you couldn't afford your own problems." Marcus remained silent. "You stood beside her when everyone else walked away." Still silence. "You protected her when it cost you your job." The room grew quiet. Finally, Marcus spoke. "I'd do it again." Charles smiled. "I know." Then he gently pushed the envelope forward once more. "That's exactly why you deserve this." Marcus stared at it. Part of him wanted to refuse immediately. Another part remembered hospital bills, medication, school tuition, rent, life. His mother quietly touched his arm. Not pushing, not advising. Just reminding him he wasn't carrying everything alone anymore. Slowly, Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was not a check. Not exactly. Several documents rested inside. Marcus looked confused. "What is this?" Charles smiled. "A job offer." Silence. Jordan nearly fell out of his chair. "A what?" Charles leaned back. "The Whitmore Foundation is being rebuilt," Marcus blinked. The charity division? Exactly. Charles nodded. We lost a lot of good people because of Richard. He paused. And we discovered we were missing something else. What? Charles smiled. Someone who actually understands the people we're supposed to help. Marcus stared at him, certain he had misunderstood. You want me to work there? No. Charles shook his head. I want you to lead it. The room exploded. Jordan shouted. His mother gasped. Marcus nearly dropped the paperwork. Lead it? Charles nodded. The Community Outreach Division. Marcus laughed nervously. Charles, I drove food deliveries 3 weeks ago. And? I don't have executive experience. You have something better. Marcus frowned. What? Charles looked directly at him. You care. The room became quiet again. Charles continued. We have enough executives. We have enough consultants. We have enough people who understand spreadsheets. His voice softened. What we don't have are people who remember what struggle feels like. Marcus didn't know how to respond, because deep down, part of him understood exactly what Charles meant. The foundation had been built to help people, not impress donors, not generate headlines, not create tax benefits. People. Real people. People like his mother. People like his neighbors. People like the families he'd delivered food to every day. Charles wasn't finished. There would be training, support, a full team. You wouldn't be doing it alone. Marcus looked down at the paperwork. His hands trembled slightly. Because this wasn't just a job. It was purpose. A chance to become part of something larger. A chance to help others the way someone had finally helped him. His mother smiled. The kind of smile only mothers can give. The kind that says they saw your potential long before you did. Jordan grinned. Dad. Marcus looked up. You should do it. The boy's voice carried absolute certainty. You always help people anyway. Nobody argued. Because it was true, Marcus sat quietly for several moments, thinking, remembering. The diner, the lunch, the insults, the key, the threats, the fear. Everything had started with one simple decision, a decision to be kind. Finally, he looked at Charles, then at his mother, then at Jordan, and smiled. I'll do it. Jordan cheered. His mother wiped away tears. Charles extended his hand. Marcus shook it. Not as a billionaire, not as a charity case, not as a hero, as a partner, as an equal, as a man whose life had unexpectedly changed. Later that afternoon, Marcus visited the Whitmore Foundation headquarters. The building wasn't glamorous. That surprised him. He expected luxury. Instead, he found practical offices, community rooms, meeting spaces, food distribution programs, educational support services. Real work happening behind the scenes. As he toured the facility, employees introduced themselves. Some recognized him immediately. Others simply welcomed him warmly. Nobody looked down on him. Nobody questioned whether he belonged. It felt unfamiliar, in the best possible way. Near the end of the tour, Charles led him into a conference room. A large whiteboard covered one wall. Dozens of project ideas filled the space. Scholarships, food programs, senior support services, medical outreach. Marcus studied the list, then stopped. One project caught his attention. Community Kitchen Expansion Initiative. His eyes lingered. Charles noticed. Like that one? Marcus smiled. Yeah. A memory surfaced. An old woman sitting alone inside a diner, hungry, embarrassed, forgotten. Charles followed his gaze. My mother likes that project too. Marcus laughed softly. I bet she does. As evening approached, he left the building feeling different. Not richer, not more important. Just lighter. For the first time in years, the future seemed bigger than survival, bigger than paying bills, bigger than getting through another week. The future looked like possibility. That night, Eleanor called. Marcus answered immediately. How are you feeling? The old woman laughed, like someone who survived a tornado. Marcus smiled. Fair. Her voice softened. My boy. Yeah? You changed more than my life. Marcus leaned back in his chair. What do you mean? Eleanor paused. A long pause. Then she answered. You reminded people that kindness still matters. Marcus looked out the window. Snowflakes drifted beneath the streetlights. The city looked peaceful, almost magical. Eleanor continued. The company will recover. Charles will recover. I'll recover. She paused again. But the real miracle wasn't exposing Richard. Marcus frowned. What was it? Her answer came softly. You stayed kind. The words hit harder than any praise, because she was right. The money, the headlines, the job, the recognition. None of that was the real victory. The real victory was that bitterness never won. Not after the insults, not after the threats, not after losing everything. Marcus still believed helping people mattered, and maybe that belief was worth more than any reward. As the call ended, Marcus sat quietly beside the window, watching snow drift through the Detroit night. For the first time in a very long time, he wasn't wondering how he would survive tomorrow. He was wondering at how many lives he might help change. And maybe that's the part of Marcus Reed's story that stays with you the longest. Not the headlines, not the billionaire, not even the scandal. Just a man who bought lunch for a lonely old woman when he could barely afford to help himself. This story reminds us that some of the most powerful things we ever do happen when nobody is watching. Marcus didn't help Eleanor because he expected a reward. He helped because it was the right thing to do, and sometimes a single act of kindness can quietly change more lives than we could ever imagine. Today, think about one small thing you can do for someone without expecting anything back. A phone call, a kind word, a helping hand. Marcus never knew that buying one meal would change his future. And you never know what difference one simple choice might make in someone else's life. If this story touched your heart, comment one below. And tell me, have you ever done something kind for a stranger without knowing what happened afterward? I'd love to hear your story. And stay with us, because the next story might make you see an ordinary moment in a completely different way.